My name is Leah Leon, and 3 months ago, I thought I had everything. I was the co-founder of a small but growing fashion company, married to Daniel Leon, charming, confident, and the man I believed was my forever. We built everything together, from late-night sketching designs to celebrating our first $1 million sale with cheap champagne. Then one rainy Thursday morning, forever broke. Enjoy our revenge stories? Subscribe, like and drop your location in the comments. Daniel left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping, I was just making coffee when I saw an email pop up. The subject line read, "About last night red heart, M." My heart froze. I clicked. It was from Maya, my best friend, and our company's lawyer. The words blurred as I read them. Romantic messages, secret plans, laughter at my expense. My hands shook. Daniel walked in, saw my face, and for a moment, his eyes told the truth before his mouth could lie. "Leah, it's not what you think," he said softly. But I already knew. The man I trusted most, and the woman I called sister, had betrayed me, not just in love, but in the business we built together. That morning, everything began to fall apart. I didn't sleep that night. The sound of the rain felt like my own heartbeat, steady, heavy, and full of pain. Daniel stayed in the guest room while I sat on the couch, staring at the dark window. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maya's name glowing on that email screen. By morning, I needed answers. When Daniel came into the kitchen, I didn't shout. My voice was calm, too calm. "How long?" I asked. He looked away. 6 months, he said quietly. 6 months. Half a year of lies, board meetings, business trips, and fake smiles. "It just happened," he whispered. "Maya understands me, Leah. You've been so busy with the company." I slammed my hand on the table. The company we built together. The one I started with my designs. He tried to hold my hand, but I pulled away. I saw guilt in his eyes, but also something colder, relief. That's when I realized he wasn't sorry for betraying me. He was sorry for getting caught. I told him to leave. He didn't argue. He just said, "You'll regret this, Leah," and walked out the door. I didn't know then, he was right. But not in the way he thought. A week later, Daniel called. His voice was smooth, like nothing had happened. "Leah," he said, "we need to talk business. The board wants to make some quick updates to the company paperwork. Just signatures, nothing serious." I should have known better. But after days of silence, exhaustion dulled my instincts. I went to the office, trying to keep my head high as whispers followed me through the hallway. Maya was there too, standing beside Daniel, calm, professional, pretending nothing was wrong. They slid a stack of papers toward me. "It's just for tax adjustments," Maya said. Her tone was firm, rehearsed. I scanned a few lines, but the legal terms blurred together. I signed. When I finished, Daniel gave me a tight smile. "Thank you," he said. 2 days later, I found out what I had really signed, a transfer of my shares, my rights, and even my creative ownership. I wasn't just betrayed. I was erased. My name vanished from the company website. My access card stopped working. When I called Daniel, his only reply was a text. "It's business, Leah. Don't make this ugly." That message burned deeper than any betrayal of love ever could. By the end of that month, everything I had built was gone. My office, my team, even the designs I had poured my heart into were no longer mine. The company's new website listed Daniel as the sole founder. Maya's name appeared beside his as Chief Legal Officer. My name? Nowhere. I went to the bank to check our joint account. It was empty. The clerk said Daniel had closed it 2 days earlier. My savings, my salary, every cent I'd earned was gone. When I called him, he didn't answer. Instead, Maya sent me a message. "You signed the papers, Leah. It's legal. Move on. Move on. As if starting over from nothing was that simple. That night, I sat on the floor of my half-packed apartment surrounded by old sketches and photos. I could still hear Daniel's voice, smooth and confident, telling me we were partners forever. Now, forever meant nothing. For the first time, I cried until morning. It wasn't just grief, it was rage, humiliation, and heartbreak twisted together. Everything I'd worked for had been stolen, and I had no one left to turn to. Or so I thought. The silence in my apartment felt louder than any storm. The laughter that once filled those rooms was gone. Only boxes, shadows, and memories remained. I hadn't eaten in a day. My phone buzzed occasionally, but never with the names I wanted to see. Friends who once promised, "We'll always have your back," suddenly vanished. No calls, no visits. In the world of business, loyalty ended where money did. At night, I sat by the window, hugging a blanket and staring at the city lights. Every building I saw reminded me of meetings, dreams, and plans Daniel and I once shared. Now, he was probably with Maya, sipping wine and celebrating. When the pain became too heavy, I remembered my mother's voice, soft, steady, and full of quiet strength. "Leah," she used to say, "never forget where you came from. The roots that ground you will one day lift you again." Those words lingered in my mind like a whisper of hope. Maybe it was time to go back, to the only place that ever felt safe, Grandma Evelyn's old house in the countryside. I didn't know it yet, but that decision would change everything. Leaving the city felt like closing the last chapter of a book I no longer wanted to read. My apartment was half empty, and each box I sealed carried a piece of my old life, sketches, framed photos, and clothes I no longer cared about. When I reached the shelf where Daniel's things used to be, I paused. There was nothing left. Not a trace of him. I picked up a single photo of us at our first store opening. I stared at it for a long time before slipping it into the trash. I told the landlord I was moving out by morning. He nodded kindly, but I saw pity in his eyes. The kind of pity you give someone who's lost more than they deserve. That night, I loaded my car with boxes and one suitcase. Before driving away, I looked at the building one last time. It had been home, and prison. The road stretched toward the countryside, where Grandma Evelyn's old house waited. I hadn't been there in years, but it suddenly felt like the only place left for me. I didn't know it yet, but Grandma was about to give me something Daniel never could, hope. Grandma's house smelled of lavender and old paper. It had been empty for years, but when I stepped inside, it felt like she was still there, her knitting basket by the chair, her framed wedding photo on the wall. I ran my fingers across the dust and whispered, "Hi, Grandma. I'm home." The first few days were quiet. I cleaned, fixed leaks, and tried to sleep. But at night, loneliness crept in again. To distract myself, I started exploring her old study, the one room she always kept locked when I was a child. Inside were boxes filled with letters, each tied neatly with faded ribbons. The envelopes were addressed to banks, friends, and companies I didn't recognize. Grandma had been a teacher all her life, but the letters hinted at something more. She had been saving, investing, planning. One letter caught my eye. The ink was faint, the paper thin. It was dated April 2, 1960, and signed Evelyn Leon. It mentioned a savings account, a deposit, and a promise to let time do its work. I held the letter close, my heart pounding. What had Grandma been saving for all these years? And why did she hide it? The next morning, I brewed tea and returned to Grandma's study. Sunlight poured through the curtains, making the dust sparkle in the air. I opened another box of letters and found something heavier tucked inside an old recipe book, a small, worn bank passbook with the name Evelyn Leon printed on the cover. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. Each line listed deposits from decades ago, small amounts at first, then larger ones. The last entry was dated 1960, and beside it, in Grandma's careful handwriting, she had written, "Patience grows more than money." The bank's name still existed, Silvercrest Bank. I had passed one of their branches in town on my way in. Could this old account still be active? I laughed softly at the thought. It was probably worth a few dollars at most, but something inside me whispered that Grandma had left it for a reason. I placed the bankbook and letters carefully into my bag. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of purpose, a reason to leave the house, to chase an answer. Tomorrow, I would visit the bank and find out what Grandma's secret really was. The next morning, I put on my neatest outfit, a navy blazer and jeans, and drove to Silvercrest Bank. My palms were sweating the entire ride. What if they laughed at me for bringing in a 60-year-old passbook? Still, Grandma's note echoed in my mind, patience grows more than money. The teller, a young man named Ethan, smiled politely as I handed him the faded booklet. I'm not sure if this account even exists anymore, I said nervously. He typed for a moment, then frowned. That's strange, he murmured. Let me get my manager. Minutes later, a woman in a gray suit appeared, Mrs. Patel. She studied the passbook, then turned to me with wide eyes. Ms. Leon, you'd better come with me. My heart pounded as we walked into her office. She turned her computer screen toward me. This account has been compounding interest since 1960, she said softly. At 7% per year. No one has touched it. The number glowing on the screen made my breath catch. It wasn't a few hundred. It wasn't even thousands. It was millions. I sat frozen as Mrs. Patel whispered, your grandmother must have known you'd need this someday. I could barely speak. Millions? From Grandma Evelyn? My head spun as Mrs. Patel handed me a small envelope that had been stored with the account. It was sealed under your grandmother's instructions, she said gently. To be opened only by you. I tore it open with trembling hands. Inside was a yellowed letter, written in Grandma's looping script. My dearest Leah. If you're reading this, life must have tested you. I can't protect you forever, but I can prepare you. I opened this account when your mother was born and promised myself it would stay hidden until my granddaughter truly needed it. Remember this, money comes and goes, but patience and dignity build real wealth. Use this gift not to escape your pain, but to rebuild your life with purpose. Love always. Grandma Evelyn. Tears blurred the words. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling her presence around me, strong, steady, loving. Mrs. Patel spoke softly. We'll help you set up access to the funds. You'll want a financial advisor, of course. I nodded slowly. My world had shattered, but suddenly, I held the pieces, and the power, to rebuild it. Driving home from the bank, I felt lighter than air, and heavier than stone. Grandma's money could change everything, but her words mattered more. Use it to rebuild your life with purpose. That night, I spread papers across my small dining table, my company's stolen documents, legal notices, and the last photos of me and Ethan before everything fell apart. My husband had taken my company, my home, even my confidence. But he hadn't taken me. I opened a notebook and wrote in bold letters, Leah Leon's comeback plan. Step 1, hire a lawyer who isn't afraid of Ethan. Step 2, investigate what he's done to my company. Step 3, take back everything he stole. Then, under those, I added Grandma's words. Patience grows more than money. For the first time in months, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I dreamed of the future, my own business reborn, my name shining again, my betrayers exposed. The next morning, I walked into a law office downtown. The gold letters on the door read, Alexandra Blackwell, attorney at law. I smiled. Ethan's game wasn't over. It was only just beginning, and this time, I would win. The office of Alexandra Blackwell looked like power itself, polished floors, tall windows, and shelves lined with legal books that probably scared people into silence. But Alexandra wasn't what I expected. She was in her 40s, with calm gray eyes and a voice that could cut through glass. So, she said, scanning my file. Your husband took your company, forged documents, and left you with nothing? Exactly, I replied. He told everyone I mismanaged the funds. He and his new partner, my former assistant, own it all now. Alexandra leaned back, thoughtful. Men like that always think they're smarter than everyone. But they forget one thing: paper trails don't lie. I told her everything, from the betrayal to Grandma's account. She didn't blink when I mentioned the millions. Good, she said simply. You'll need resources if we're going to bring him down properly. Her plan was simple but brilliant. We'd start quietly, gathering proof that Ethan had falsified the business transfer. Once we had evidence, we'd file for fraud. As I left her office, Alexandra called after me, "Leah, don't rush revenge. Timing is everything." Grandma's words echoed in my heart. Patience grows more than money. And this time, patience would buy justice. For the next few weeks, I became part detective, part actress. Alexandra guided me through every careful step. No outbursts, no clues, no warnings to Ethan. "We'll win by being quiet," she reminded me. "The loud ones always lose first." I started with the business files. Late nights were spent scrolling through my old email backups, financial reports, and hidden folders I'd saved on a flash drive years ago. That's when I noticed the first crack: a payment to an unknown consulting firm made just days before Ethan filed for ownership transfer. Alexandra's private investigator, Marcus, traced the company to Ethan's new girlfriend, Tara Bloom. My former assistant. She'd created the fake invoices that made it look like I was embezzling. "Got them," Marcus said with a grin, sliding printed screenshots across the table. Classic setup. Sloppy, too. Every discovery fueled my determination. I wasn't just fighting for money anymore, I was fighting for my name. At night, I'd whisper to Grandma's photo on my nightstand, "We're almost there." And even though I couldn't hear her voice, I felt her steady presence beside me, the kind of patience that waits, plans, and strikes only when the time is perfect. By the end of the month, Alexandra and Marcus had built a quiet storm of evidence: hidden bank transfers, forged signatures, and emails that tied Ethan and Tara to everything. But we didn't move yet. "Let them think you're defeated," Alexandra advised. "The best revenge looks like surrender." So I played my part perfectly. When Ethan called, smug as ever, to check on me, I made my voice small. "I'm fine," I said softly. "I've accepted everything. You deserve the company." He laughed. "Glad you're finally being reasonable, Leah." But inside, I smiled. Every word I spoke dug the hole deeper beneath his feet. Meanwhile, Alexandra filed quiet motions in court, requests for financial records, asset traces, and an audit. Ethan never saw them coming because they were buried under legal jargon. Marcus planted the final piece: an anonymous tip to the business press suggesting irregular activity in Ethan's company finances. By the time he realized something was wrong, it would be too late. That night, I stood on my balcony, the city lights glowing beneath me, and whispered to the wind, "It's time." For months I'd been the broken one. But tomorrow, Ethan would learn, I was never the victim. 2 weeks later, the first crack appeared. Ethan's company, Leon Design Group, the one I built from nothing, was suddenly under investigation for financial inconsistencies. The story broke online, spreading like wildfire. I sat at Grandma's kitchen table, coffee in hand, watching the headlines scroll across my laptop. CEO Ethan Leon faces audit after anonymous tip. Anonymous. I couldn't help but smile. Marcus called minutes later. The auditors are tearing through his accounts. They've already found missing funds. He's panicking. And he was. Photos of him leaving the office looking pale and angry were all over social media. Reporters were camping outside his building, demanding answers. Then came the best part: Tara deleted all her social media overnight. According to Marcus, she'd already hired her own lawyer. The golden couple was starting to crack. Alexandra sent me a brief text. "He's off balance. Don't gloat. Let him fall. So I stayed quiet, just as Grandma would have wanted. The silence tasted sweet. Every empire built on lies eventually collapses under its own weight. Ethan's was beginning to crumble, and I wasn't even finished yet. Because when the truth finally came out, he wouldn't just lose his company. He'd lose everything. It happened on a Thursday evening. I was reviewing documents with Alexandra when my phone started buzzing non-stop. Ethan. Alexandra gave me a knowing look. Answer, she said. Let's see what he sounds like when the walls start shaking. I took a deep breath and pressed accept. Leah, he snapped. What did you do? I kept my tone calm, almost cold. Do? I don't know what you mean. Don't play games with me. His voice cracked, the charm was gone. The auditors froze my accounts. The board's threatening to suspend me. Someone leaked internal emails. I almost laughed. Sounds like karma, Ethan. You're behind this, he hissed. After everything I gave you. You took from me, I cut in. My company, my money, my dignity. You thought I'd just disappear? You should have known me better. Silence filled the line. Then a low growl. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said softly. But I'll never regret fighting back. I hung up before he could answer. Alexandra smiled. Perfect delivery, she said. Now he'll start making mistakes. Angry men always do. And just like that, I felt it, the power shift. The hunter had officially become the prey. By the next week, Ethan's perfect world began to crumble faster than anyone expected. News outlets were running daily updates, investors were backing out, and the board of Leon Design Group had called for an emergency meeting. Marcus fed me quiet updates from the inside. He's losing control, he said one night. Half the board wants him out. The audit revealed forged invoices, exactly what we found. They're turning on him to save themselves. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Meanwhile, Tara had vanished from the public eye. But Alexandra's team uncovered emails between her and Ethan, proof of their scheme to frame me for embezzlement. Alexandra grinned as she slid the evidence across the table. Once we submit this, she said, his career is over. That evening, I walked through the city and passed my old office building. Workers were taking down the company banner for inspection. For a moment, I saw my reflection in the glass, stronger, sharper, unbroken. Ethan had taken everything to destroy me. But in doing so, he'd handed me every weapon I needed to end him. I smiled faintly to myself. Grandma, patience really does grow more than money. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Reporters whispered, cameras clicked, and Ethan sat at the defense table, pretending to look calm. But I saw it. The tight jaw, the twitch in his hand. He was terrified. I sat beside Alexandra, my palms steady on the table. She glanced at me and whispered, just breathe. We've already won. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The hearing began with Alexandra presenting our evidence, forged signatures, fake consulting payments, and hidden accounts linking back to Ethan and Tara. Each document hit like a hammer. Ethan's lawyer tried to object, but Alexandra's confidence never wavered. Your Honor, she said, her voice firm, this is a clear pattern of fraud designed to strip my client, Leah Leon, of her rightful ownership and assets. Then, one final piece, Tara's signed statement, admitting the truth to save herself. Ethan's face turned white. The courtroom gasped. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Leon, do you deny these charges? Ethan's lips parted, but no words came out. I felt something shift deep inside me, not just victory, but peace. For the first time, I wasn't a victim standing before him. I was the woman he underestimated, and I had finally won. When the gavel struck, it sounded like thunder. The court hereby rules in favor of Ms. Leah Leon, the judge announced. All assets, intellectual property, and company ownership are to be returned immediately. Mr. Ethan Leon is found guilty of fraud and forgery. The room erupted. Reporters rushed for quotes, flashes filled the air, and Ethan sat frozen, pale, defeated, ruined. I didn't look at him for long. There was nothing left to say. I gathered my papers and walked out beside Alexandra, my heels echoing down the marble floor like punctuation marks to the end of his story. Outside, the sunlight hit my face, warm and bright. Marcus was waiting with a grin. "You did it, Leah." "No," I said quietly. "We did it." Alexandra handed me a sealed folder. "Everything's officially yours again, and more. The court awarded damages too." I held the papers against my chest and looked up at the sky. For months I'd lived in the dark, but now the light didn't hurt anymore. Grandma had been right. Patience and dignity had rebuilt what rage could never fix. Ethan had taken my empire. But I had taken back my life. The first time I walked back into my old office, it felt like stepping into a ghost of my past. The walls still bore my designs, my ideas, everything Ethan had stolen. But this time, it was mine again. Truly mine. The staff greeted me cautiously at first. They'd all seen the headlines. Some looked ashamed, others relieved. I smiled and said simply, "We're starting over. Fresh. Together." That day, I removed every trace of Ethan and Tara, their photos, their names, their poison. I replaced the sign in the lobby with a new one. Leah Leon Designs, built on truth. It wasn't just a company anymore, it was a symbol of resilience. I invested part of Grandma's inheritance into rebuilding, not just the business, but scholarships for young women in design. No one would ever feel as powerless as I once did. When I locked the doors that night, I stood for a moment in silence, the city lights glowing beyond the glass. Grandma's letter lay folded in my pocket. "Use it to rebuild your life with purpose." I smiled through quiet tears. From ashes, I had risen, stronger, wiser, unshakable. And I was just getting started. 2 months later, my story was everywhere. Magazines called it the Phoenix of Design. Reporters wanted every detail, the betrayal, the trial, the comeback. When Harper Lane, a well-known journalist, requested a sit-down interview, Alexandra encouraged me. "Tell your story," she said. "But tell it your way." At the studio, bright lights glared and cameras rolled. Harper leaned forward, her voice gentle. "Leah, after everything you've endured, how did you find the strength to fight back?" I took a slow breath. "I remembered who I was before they tried to take it from me," I said. "And I remembered my grandmother's words, that patience and dignity are stronger than revenge." Harper smiled. "Do you forgive them?" I paused. "Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for me. I don't need to hate them anymore, they already destroyed themselves." The interview ended with applause from the crew. Later that night, the segment went viral. Comments poured in, women sharing their own stories of betrayal, rebuilding, and courage. For the first time, my voice wasn't just mine. It belonged to every woman who'd ever been broken and refused to stay that way. And that was a legacy worth more than money. A few weeks after the interview aired, I returned to Grandma's house for a quiet weekend. I'd been so focused on rebuilding that I'd almost forgotten how peaceful the countryside could be. The lavender fields were in bloom again, just like the day I first arrived broken and lost. When I checked the mailbox, I found a single cream-colored envelope with no return address. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Leah, I watched your interview. You've become the woman your grandmother always knew you would be. There's one more thing she left behind, something she wanted you to have when you were ready. Visit the Silvercrest branch. Ask for Mr. Doyle. A friend." My heart raced. Another secret? Grandma had already given me so much, her love, her wisdom, her fortune. What could possibly be left? The next morning, curiosity won. I drove back into town, clutching the letter. At the bank, the teller smiled knowingly. "Mr. Doyle has been expecting you," she said. Moments later, an older gentleman appeared with a small wooden box in his hands. "This," he said softly, "is the final part of your grandmother's gift." Mr. Doyle placed the small wooden box on the desk between us. It was smooth, carved with delicate roses, Grandma's favorite flower. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside lay a silver locket and a folded piece of paper. I opened the note first. The handwriting was unmistakable, Grandma's gentle, looping script. "My dearest Leah. If this box has found you, then you have already proven your strength. This locket belonged to my mother, who taught me that every woman carries two hearts, one for love, and one for courage. You've used both. Keep this close, not as a reminder of pain, but of power. Never let your success harden you, let it guide others to stand tall. Love always. Grandma Evelyn." Tears slid down my cheeks as I held the locket in my palm. Inside was a tiny photo, me as a child, sitting on Grandma's lap, both of us smiling. For the first time, I understood her plan completely. The money wasn't her real gift, this was. The wisdom, the strength, the unbreakable belief that I could rise again. I pressed the locket to my heart and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma." The sun was setting as I drove back to the city, Grandma's locket warm against my chest. Every mile between her house and my office felt like a bridge, connecting who I was to who I had become. When I walked into Leah Leon Designs, the team was still working late, laughter echoing through the hallways. My employees, my family now, waved as I passed. They didn't see a woman who had been betrayed. They saw a leader who had rebuilt from ashes. In my office, I placed the locket beside Grandma's framed photo. The city lights glowed behind it, and for a moment, I could almost hear her voice. "You did it, Leah. You found your purpose." I smiled through tears. That night, I wrote a letter to the next generation of women in my mentorship program. I told them about loss, patience, and power, and how sometimes, life's cruelest storms reveal the strongest roots. I signed it simply. Leah Leon. Then I closed my office door and looked out at the skyline. The past was behind me. The future was wide open. And I was finally home. A year later, my life looked nothing like the one I'd lost, and everything like the one Grandma must have dreamed for me. Leah Leon Designs had grown beyond what I ever imagined. We opened studios in 3 cities, launched a foundation for young women in business, and hosted an annual award in Grandma Evelyn's name. On the night of the first Evelyn Leon Scholarship Gala, I stood at the podium beneath a canopy of golden lights. Faces filled the room, students, artists, survivors, women who had turned pain into power, just like I had. When I spoke, my voice didn't shake. "This isn't just my story," I said. "It's ours. It's proof that betrayal can break you, but it can also build you stronger, wiser, and free." The audience rose in applause. I looked upward, imagining Grandma watching from somewhere higher, smiling that soft, proud smile. After the event, I walked outside, the city alive with light. I touched the locket at my neck and whispered, "We did it." Grandma's patience had grown into my strength, and my strength would become another woman's hope. The revenge was over. But the legacy, that would last forever. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.